Master Chen Wei had spent 30 years perfecting his martial arts skills in the mountains of Sichuan province. His weathered hands could split wooden boards with a single strike, and his feet moved like whispers across the ground. At 55, he commanded respect from every martial artist in the region. Students traveled from distant cities just to witness his legendary iron palm technique. The autumn of 2019 brought an unusual opportunity to Chen Wei's doorstep. A wealthy businessman named Liu Ming approached him with a peculiar request. Liu had recently purchased an ancient estate that included a mysterious underground tomb dating back to the Ming dynasty. Local workers refused to enter the site, claiming it was cursed and protected by supernatural forces. "Master Chen," Liu pleaded during their meeting at a traditional tea house, "I need someone with your skills and courage. The tomb contains valuable historical artifacts that belong in a museum, but my workers are too frightened to proceed. Strange incidents have been occurring." Chen Wei listened carefully as Liu described the events. Tools would disappear overnight. Strange sounds echoed from the underground chambers, and several workers reported seeing a shadowy figure moving through the tunnels. Most disturbing of all, anyone who attempted to remove artifacts from the tomb would find themselves inexplicably weak and disoriented within hours. The master's curiosity was piqued. Throughout his decades of training, he had encountered many unusual situations and believed that most supernatural claims had logical explanations. He had once exposed a fake ghost that turned out to be a con artist using mirrors and hidden speakers. Another time, he discovered that a haunted temple was simply experiencing structural settling that created eerie noises. "I will investigate your tomb," Chen Wei finally declared, setting down his teacup with determination. "But I work alone, and I keep whatever I find that has historical value for proper authorities." Liu agreed immediately, desperate for any solution. He provided Chen Wei with detailed maps of the estate, keys to all accessible areas, and a generous advance payment. The tomb lay beneath the main house, accessible through a hidden entrance behind an ornate bookshelf in the library. 3 days later, Chen Wei arrived at the estate carrying only his traditional canvas bag containing basic supplies, a powerful flashlight, and his grandfather's ceremonial Dao sword. The weapon had been blessed by Buddhist monks decades ago and had never failed him in dangerous situations. The house stood silent and imposing against the gray October sky. Liu had dismissed all workers for the week, leaving Chen Wei completely alone with whatever mysteries lay beneath the ground. As he approached the front door, a cold wind rustled through the bare trees, carrying with it an odd metallic scent that made his nostrils flare. Inside the library, Chen Wei easily located the hidden mechanism behind the bookshelf. The passage revealed a narrow stone staircase descending into darkness. The air that drifted upward felt unnaturally cold and carried that same metallic odor he had noticed outside, but stronger now, almost overwhelming. As he descended the worn steps, his flashlight beam revealed intricate carvings on the walls depicting scenes of ancient Chinese court life. Dragons wound around pillars and phoenix birds soared across painted ceilings. The craftsmanship was extraordinary, suggesting this tomb belonged to someone of great importance during the Ming era. At the bottom of the staircase, Chen Wei found himself in a vast underground chamber with multiple corridors branching off in different directions. His flashlight illuminated stone tables covered with jade ornaments, golden ceremonial cups, and scrolls wrapped in silk cloth. Everything appeared untouched by time, as if the tomb had been sealed yesterday rather than centuries ago. But something felt wrong. The silence was too complete, too heavy. In his experience, old underground spaces always had subtle sounds, dripping water, settling stones, or small animals. This place felt completely dead, as if sound itself was being absorbed by the walls. Chen Wei moved carefully through the main chamber, his trained senses alert for any danger. His martial arts training had taught him to trust his instincts, and every instinct was now screaming that he was not alone in this ancient place. Chen Wei had been exploring the tomb for nearly 2 hours when he first heard the footsteps. The sound was subtle at first, a soft scraping against stone that could have been his imagination. But as he moved deeper into the eastern corridor, the sounds became more distinct and rhythmic, like someone walking with measured, deliberate steps. He stopped moving and held his breath, straining to locate the source. The footsteps continued for several seconds, then stopped abruptly when he stopped. When he resumed walking, they resumed as well, maintaining the same pace and distance. Someone or something was following him through the darkness. Chen Wei's hand instinctively moved to the handle of his Dao sword. His years of martial arts training had prepared him for many types of confrontations. But fighting in narrow underground corridors presented unique challenges. He needed to draw out his pursuer into a more open space where his skills would be most effective. Retracing his path back to the main chamber, Chen Wei deliberately made noise with his footsteps, wanting his follower to know his location. As he emerged into the larger space, he quickly positioned himself near the center, giving himself room to move in any direction. His flashlight swept across the chamber, creating dancing shadows among the ancient artifacts. "I know you're there," he called out, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "Show yourself and we can settle this honorably." For a long moment, nothing happened. Then from the western corridor, a figure stepped into the edge of his flashlight beam. Chen Wei's breath caught in his throat. The person approaching him was unlike anyone he had ever encountered. The man appeared to be in his 30s, wearing traditional Chinese robes that looked as if they had been crafted centuries ago. His skin had an unusual pale quality, and his dark hair was pulled back in an ancient style with jade ornaments. Most unsettling of all were his eyes. They seemed to reflect the flashlight beam like an animal's eyes in darkness. "You do not belong here." "Outsider," the figure spoke in perfect Mandarin, but with an accent Chen Wei couldn't identify. The voice carried an authority that demanded respect. "This sacred place has been under my protection for 400 years. Chen Wei studied the man carefully, noting his posture and the way he moved. Despite the strange appearance and impossible claim about 400 years, this person displayed the controlled grace of a highly trained martial artist. His stance was perfect, his balance centered, and his hands positioned as if ready to strike or defend at any moment. "I'm here at the request of the property owner," Chen Wei replied, keeping his own voice steady and respectful. "I mean no disrespect to this place or to you. I only seek to understand what's happening here." The guardian, for that's clearly what he was, stepped closer, and Chen Wei could see more details of his appearance. The robes were indeed ancient in style, made of silk with intricate embroidery that must have taken months to complete. The jade ornaments in his hair were carved with symbols Chen Wei recognized as protective characters used in imperial tombs. "Many have come seeking treasure," the guardian continued, his voice carrying the weight of centuries of experience. "All have left empty-handed or not at all. This tomb contains the remains of Princess Mei Lin, daughter of Emperor Wan Li. She died protecting sacred knowledge that must not fall into unworthy hands." Chen Wei processed this information quickly. Princess Mei Lin was a legendary figure, known for her intelligence and her patronage of scholars and mystics. Historical records suggested she had discovered or created something of immense value before her mysterious death at age 28. If this truly was her tomb, it explained the guardian's fierce protection. "What sacred knowledge?" Chen Wei asked, genuinely curious now rather than simply cautious. The guardian's expression shifted slightly, showing what might have been surprise at the question. Most intruders, he seemed to realize, asked about treasure or artifacts, not knowledge. She discovered the secret of extending human life through the harmony of martial arts, meditation, and alchemical practices, the guardian explained. Not immortality, but the ability to live for several centuries while maintaining youth and strength. The knowledge is written on scrolls hidden in her burial chamber. This revelation struck Chen Wei like a physical blow. Such knowledge would be invaluable not just for its historical significance, but for what it could mean for humanity. Yet he also understood why it needed protection. In the wrong hands, such secrets could be used for evil purposes or could upset the natural order of life and death. "And you?" Chen Wei said slowly, studying the guardian's youthful face and perfect posture. "You've been using this knowledge to protect the tomb for 4 centuries. The guardian nodded solemnly. "I was Princess Mei Lin's personal bodyguard and closest friend. When she died, I took an oath to protect her secrets until someone worthy could be found to inherit her wisdom. Many have tried to prove their worth through force or trickery. All have failed." Chen Wei understood now that he was facing something far more significant than a simple tomb robbery case. This was a test that had been waiting for the right person for over 400 years. The two martial artists stood facing each other in the ancient chamber, separated by centuries of time yet connected by their shared dedication to the fighting arts. Chen Wei could feel the weight of history pressing down on him, as he realized this encounter would determine not just his own fate, but possibly the fate of knowledge that could change the world. How do I prove my worth? Chen Wei asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. The Guardian's eyes gleamed in the flashlight beam. The same way all others have attempted, through combat. But understand this, Master Chen Wei. I know your name, your reputation, and your skills. I have been watching you since you entered this tomb. Your movements, your breathing, your respect for this sacred place, all of these tell me you are different from the others who have come before. Chen Wei was surprised that the Guardian knew his identity, but then realized that someone who had lived for 4 centuries would have many ways of gathering information about the outside world. The Guardian's next words confirmed this. I know of your victory in the Sichuan provincial tournament 15 years ago. I witnessed your demonstration at the Shaolin Temple where you broke 7 boards with a single palm strike. I have even seen you train in the mountains, pushing yourself beyond normal human limits. You seek perfection not for fame or money, but for the pure joy of mastering the art. This revelation made Chen Wei's skin crawl with unease. The idea that he had been observed without his knowledge for years was disturbing, yet he had to admit it showed the Guardian's dedication to his duty. Someone protecting secrets of this magnitude would naturally want to know about potential threats or candidates. But watching from a distance tells only part of the story. The Guardian continued, beginning to remove his outer robe to reveal a simpler white garment underneath. True character is revealed only under pressure, in the moment when everything is at stake. Chen Wei watched as the Guardian prepared for combat. The man's movements were fluid and economical, wasting no motion. As he folded his robe carefully and placed it on a stone table, Chen Wei noticed something that made his breath catch. The Guardian's arms and hands showed no signs of aging, no wrinkles, no age spots, no visible scars despite 4 centuries of martial arts practice. Before we begin, Chen Wei said, also preparing himself by removing his jacket and checking his stance, I need to understand the rules of this test. Are we fighting to submission, to unconsciousness, or to death? The Guardian smiled for the first time since their encounter began, and Chen Wei was struck by how the expression transformed his austere features. We fight until one of us can no longer continue, or until one yields. Death is not the goal, understanding is. Princess Mei Lin believed that combat reveals the true nature of a person's spirit. Through fighting, we will both learn what needs to be learned. Chen Wei nodded his acceptance and drew his Dao sword, the ancient blade singing as it left its scabbard. The weapon had been forged by master swordsmiths and blessed by Buddhist monks, making it both a practical tool and a spiritual artifact. In the flashlight's beam, the steel gleamed with an inner light that seemed almost alive. The Guardian's response surprised him. Instead of drawing a weapon of his own, the man simply shifted into an empty-handed fighting stance that Chen Wei recognized as a variant of white crane style, but modified in ways he had never seen before. The positioning was more fluid, more connected to the ground, as if the Guardian had spent centuries perfecting every angle and balance point. You choose to face a sword with bare hands? Chen Wei asked, genuinely concerned. Despite the Guardian's obvious skill, fighting an armed opponent empty-handed was extremely dangerous. My hands have been my weapons for 400 years, the Guardian replied calmly. They have stopped blades, shattered stones, and turned aside attacks that would have killed ordinary men. The question is not whether my hands can match your sword, but whether your sword can match my hands. Chen Wei had faced many overconfident opponents in his martial arts career, but something in the Guardian's tone suggested this was not boasting but simple fact. The man spoke with the calm certainty of someone who had tested his abilities countless times over centuries of combat. They began to circle each other slowly, each studying the other's movement patterns and looking for openings. Chen Wei held his sword in a middle guard position, ready to attack or defend as opportunities presented themselves. The Guardian moved like flowing water, his stance constantly shifting in small ways that made it impossible to predict his next action. The first exchange came suddenly. Chen Wei launched a probing thrust toward the Guardian's center, not intending to strike decisively but wanting to test his opponent's reactions. What happened next defied everything Chen Wei thought he knew about combat physics. The Guardian's left hand moved in a circular motion that seemed to catch Chen Wei's blade in mid-thrust, redirecting its energy while his right hand shot forward in a palm strike aimed at Chen Wei's chest. The master barely managed to step back and avoid the strike, but he could feel the displacement of air as the Guardian's palm passed inches from his body. More shocking than the near miss was what had happened to his sword. The blade now had a small notch near its tip, as if the guardian's bare hand had actually chipped the forged steel. Chen Wei examined the damage in amazement, running his thumb over the rough edge where metal had been sheared away. Chen Wei stared at the damaged blade in disbelief. The sword had been forged from the finest steel and had never shown even a scratch in 30 years of use. Yet the guardian's bare hand had chipped it as easily as breaking a dry twig. This was not just superior martial arts skill. This was something beyond normal human capability. How was that possible? Chen Wei whispered, more to himself than to the guardian. 4 centuries of practice and the princess's knowledge of internal energy cultivation. The guardian replied matter-of-factly. When ki is properly concentrated and directed, the human body can exceed its apparent limitations. Princess Mei Lin taught me techniques that even the greatest masters of her time considered impossible. Chen Wei had studied ki cultivation for decades and had achieved levels of internal energy that most martial artists never reached. He could break boards with his palm, punch through brick walls, and move with speed that seemed superhuman to ordinary people. But what the guardian had just demonstrated was on an entirely different level. "Show me again," Chen Wei requested, adjusting his grip on the sword. "I need to understand what I'm facing." This time, Chen Wei attacked with a combination series. A diagonal cut followed immediately by a horizontal slash designed to limit the guardian's options for counterattack. The guardian's response was even more astounding than before. His hands moved in a complex pattern that seemed to create a barrier of force around his body. The sword's edge struck what felt like solid stone, sending vibrations up Chen Wei's arms that nearly made him drop the weapon. But the most shocking part came next. The guardian stepped forward into Chen Wei's guard, his movement so fluid and precise that he seemed to slip between the sword strikes like smoke. His right hand pressed against Chen Wei's chest in what appeared to be a gentle push, but the force behind it sent the master flying backward across the chamber. Chen Wei hit the stone wall hard enough to knock the breath from his lungs. As he slid to the ground, he could taste blood in his mouth and feel the beginning of what would certainly be spectacular bruises across his back and shoulders. Yet even as pain shot through his body, his mind was racing with excitement and wonder. "Incredible," he gasped, struggling to his feet. "You're using internal energy in ways I've never seen. The way you condensed ki into your hands to stop my blade. The method you used to project force through that palm strike. These aren't techniques from any martial arts manual I've ever studied." The guardian helped Chen Wei to his feet, showing genuine concern for his condition. Princess Mei Lin spent years studying with Taoist masters, Buddhist monks, and even traveling scholars from distant lands. She combined their knowledge with her own research to develop new applications of internal energy. What I showed you represents only the most basic level of her discoveries. Chen Wei tested his arms and legs, relieved to find that despite the impact, no bones appeared to be broken. The guardian had controlled his force precisely, delivering enough power to demonstrate his abilities without causing permanent injury. This level of control over internal energy suggested centuries of refinement and practice. "But the test is not over," the guardian continued, returning to his fighting stance. "I have shown you what 4 centuries of practice can achieve. Now you must show me what drives you to seek perfection despite knowing you may never reach such heights." Chen Wei understood. This was not just about fighting skill. It was about character, motivation, and the spirit that drove a person to continue pursuing excellence, even when faced with seemingly impossible standards. He thought about his years of training in the mountains, the countless hours of practice, the dedication to improvement that had consumed his adult life. "I train not because I expect to become perfect," Chen Wei said, raising his sword again despite the pain in his shoulders. "I train because the pursuit itself gives meaning to my life. Each day I practice, I become a little better than I was the day before. That growth, that constant reaching toward something greater, that's what makes existence worthwhile." The guardian nodded approvingly, but his stance remained ready for combat. "Words are easy to speak. Show me this philosophy in action." What followed was the most intense and educational fight of Chen Wei's life. Instead of trying to match the guardian's superhuman abilities, he focused on demonstrating everything he had learned about martial arts in 30 years of dedicated practice. His swordwork became a flowing dance of attack and defense, each movement connected to the next in seamless combinations that showcased decades of refinement. The guardian responded by gradually increasing the complexity of his own techniques, showing Chen Wei applications of internal energy that bordered on the mystical. He could apparently harden his skin to deflect blade strikes, project force through the air without physical contact, and move with speed that made him seem to teleport from one position to another. But as the fight continued, something unexpected began to happen. Chen Wei started to adapt to the guardian's superhuman abilities. His decades of training had taught him to learn from every opponent, to find patterns and weaknesses even in superior fighters. While he couldn't match the guardian's raw power, he began to predict and counter some of the more exotic techniques. After nearly an hour of intense combat, both fighters were breathing heavily. Chen Wei's sword now had several more notches from contact with the guardian's key hardened hands, but he had also managed to land several successful strikes against his opponent's robes, proving that even centuries of practice didn't make someone invulnerable. Enough, the guardian finally called, stepping back and bowing formally. I have seen what I needed to see. Chen Wei lowered his sword and returned the bow, still trying to process everything he had just experienced. His body ached from the impacts. His sword was damaged beyond repair, but his spirit felt more alive than it had in years. Fighting someone of the Guardian's caliber had pushed him to levels of performance he didn't know he possessed. Have I passed your test? Chen Wei asked, genuinely uncertain about the outcome. He had held his own against a superhuman opponent, but he had also been clearly outmatched in terms of raw ability. The Guardian's expression was thoughtful as he considered the question. You have demonstrated something more important than victory, he said finally. You showed the ability to learn and adapt even when facing the impossible. Most who have challenged me became frustrated and desperate when they realized they could not win through superior force. You instead became curious and began studying my techniques even while fighting for your life. Chen Wei felt a surge of hope, but the Guardian's next words tempered his excitement. However, passing the combat test is only the first requirement. Princess Mei Lin's knowledge is too dangerous to be given to someone based solely on martial arts skill. You must also prove your wisdom, your moral character, and your understanding of the responsibilities that come with such power. The Guardian led Chen Wei deeper into the tomb, through corridors lined with increasingly elaborate artwork and decorations. As they walked, he explained the history of Princess Mei Lin's discoveries and the tragic events that had led to her early death. The princess was brilliant beyond her years, the Guardian said, his voice carrying the weight of personal loss even after 4 centuries. She understood that physical longevity without spiritual wisdom would create monsters. Her research focused not just on extending life, but on ensuring that those who lived longer would use their time wisely. They arrived at a circular chamber dominated by a raised platform in the center. On the platform stood an ornate sarcophagus made from white jade and decorated with gold inlays depicting scenes from Chinese mythology. But what drew Chen Wei's attention were the walls surrounding the sarcophagus. They were covered with scrolls, books, and carved tablets containing more written knowledge than he had ever seen in one place. This is Princess Mei Lin's library, the Guardian explained with obvious reverence. Everything she learned, everything she discovered, everything she believed important enough to preserve, it's all here. The scrolls contain not just the techniques for life extension, but also her thoughts on philosophy, governance, ethics, and the proper use of power. Chen Wei walked slowly around the chamber, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what he was seeing. Some of the scrolls appeared to be original works by the princess herself, while others were copies of texts that had been lost to history. The knowledge contained in this room could revolutionize not just martial arts but medicine, philosophy, and human understanding of the body's potential. Why did she die so young if she had discovered the secret of longevity? Chen Wei asked, studying a scroll that appeared to contain detailed anatomical drawings. The Guardian's face darkened with an old pain. She was poisoned by her own brother, Prince Wei Ming, who had learned of her research and wanted to steal it for himself. He believed that immortality should belong to men of power, not be shared with scholars and mystics. The princess knew of his plans but hoped she could convince him to see reason. She was naive about human nature, Chen Wei observed. Perhaps she simply believed too strongly in the power of wisdom to overcome greed. In any case, she used her final days to hide her most important discoveries and to establish the protections that have kept this place safe for 4 centuries. Her last act was to grant me the longevity I needed to serve as guardian until someone worthy could be found. Chen Wei absorbed this information while continuing to examine the scrolls. The scope of the princess's research was staggering. She had apparently made discoveries in fields ranging from alchemy to astronomy to human psychology. Some of the texts described techniques for enhancing memory, increasing physical strength, and accelerating the healing of injuries. "What exactly do you need me to prove?" Chen Wei asked, turning back to face the Guardian. "You've said that martial arts skill alone isn't enough, but what other tests await me?" The Guardian gestured toward a specific section of the wall where several scrolls were bound together with silk ribbons. Princess Mei Lin left behind a series of scenarios, moral and ethical dilemmas that anyone seeking her knowledge must resolve. Your answers will reveal your character and your understanding of the responsibilities that come with power. Chen Wei approached the indicated scrolls and carefully unrolled the first one. The text was written in beautiful calligraphy that seemed to glow in the chamber's dim light. As he read, he realized he was looking at the first of what appeared to be a dozen complex ethical puzzles. The first scenario described a situation where someone with extended lifespan had accumulated vast wealth and knowledge over several centuries. The question asked what moral obligations such a person would have toward ordinary humans who live normal lifespans. Should they use their advantages to help humanity, or would such interference disrupt the natural order? These questions have no simple answers, Chen Wei said after reading through several more scenarios. That's exactly the point, the Guardian replied. Princess Mei Lin believed that anyone seeking power over life and death must first grapple with the implications of such power. She didn't want clear-cut answers. She wanted to see how potential inheritors of her knowledge would think through complex problems. Chen, we spent the next several hours working through the ethical scenarios. Each one was more challenging than the last, forcing him to consider not just immediate consequences but long-term effects of various actions. The princess had clearly been a profound thinker who understood that extending human life would create unprecedented moral challenges. As he worked through the final scenario, Chen Wei became aware that the Guardian was watching him intently, studying not just his written answers but his facial expressions and body language as he wrestled with each dilemma. When Chen Wei finished writing his responses to the final ethical scenario, a profound silence settled over the burial chamber. The Guardian had remained motionless for the past hour, watching every expression that crossed Chen Wei's face as he struggled with the princess's complex moral puzzles. Now, as Chen Wei set down the writing brush and stepped back from the scrolls, the moment of judgment had arrived. The Guardian moved forward to examine Chen Wei's answers, reading each response carefully. His face revealed nothing of his thoughts as he studied the handwriting that would determine whether 4 centuries of waiting had finally come to an end. Chen Wei found himself holding his breath, realizing that everything depended on whether his moral reasoning aligned with what Princess Mei Lin had been seeking. Your answer to the question about using extended life for personal gain versus service to humanity, the Guardian said finally, his voice thoughtful. You wrote that true wisdom comes from understanding that individual advancement and collective good are not separate goals, but interconnected aspects of the same larger purpose. This shows maturity beyond your years. Chen Wei felt a cautious optimism, but the Guardian continued examining the other responses with the same careful attention. Several more minutes passed before he spoke again. Your response to the scenario about whether to share longevity techniques with world leaders was particularly insightful. You argued that power without wisdom is dangerous regardless of how long someone lives, and that extending the lives of corrupt leaders would only multiply their capacity for harm. Princess Mei Lin wrote almost identical words in her private journal. The Guardian rolled up the scrolls and returned them to their place on the wall. When he turned back to face Chen Wei, his expression had transformed. The stern wariness that had characterized their entire encounter was gone, replaced by something that looked remarkably like relief. Master Chen Wei, the Guardian said formally, you have passed both the trial of strength and the trial of wisdom. Princess Mei Lin would have approved of your character and your understanding of the responsibilities that come with her knowledge. Chen Wei felt a mixture of elation and terror as the implications sank in. He was about to become the inheritor of secrets that could fundamentally change human existence, but also the bearer of responsibilities that would last for centuries to come. What happens now? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The guardian smiled, and for the first time Chen Wei could see the young man he had been 400 years earlier, before the weight of his eternal duty had settled on his shoulders. Now you must make a choice. You can accept Princess Mei Lin's knowledge and the obligations that come with it, or you can walk away and return to your normal life. Once you accept, there is no going back. If I accept, what exactly am I agreeing to? You will learn the techniques that will extend your life for several centuries, though not indefinitely. You will become the new guardian of this tomb and the princess's secrets. Most importantly, you will spend your extended lifetime seeking someone worthy to inherit the knowledge after you, just as I have done. You will also use the princess's discoveries to help humanity, but always carefully and discreetly. Chen Wei walked slowly around the burial chamber, considering the magnitude of the decision before him. His normal life had been fulfilling, teaching martial arts, competing in tournaments, perfecting his skills in solitude. But it had also been limited in scope, affecting only the small number of people he encountered directly. What happened to the princess's brother, Prince Wei Ming? Chen Wei asked, suddenly curious about the fate of the man who had caused this entire situation. The guardian's expression darkened. He never found the tomb. Princess Mei Lin's protections were too strong, and he died of normal old age while still searching. His descendants occasionally attempt to locate this place, but they lack the combination of martial arts skill and moral character needed to pass the tests. And the businessman who hired me, Liu Ming? A descendant of Prince Wei Ming, though he doesn't know the full history. His interest in the tomb is primarily financial, which is why the protective measures have been preventing his workers from succeeding. He sensed something valuable was here but had no understanding of what he was actually seeking. Chen Wei nodded, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. His encounter with this ancient mystery had been carefully orchestrated by forces he was only beginning to understand. The guardian had been influencing events to bring the right person to the tomb at the right time. I accept, Chen Wei said finally, his voice firm with conviction. I accept the knowledge, the responsibilities, and the burden of guardianship. The guardian's relief was visible as tension he had carried for centuries finally began to leave his shoulders. Then we begin immediately. The first thing you must learn is the basic longevity technique that will slow your aging and grant you the time needed to fulfill your obligations. What followed was the most intensive educational experience of Chen Wei's life. The guardian taught him breathing exercises that seemed to restructure his internal energy pathways, meditation techniques that connected his consciousness to deeper levels of reality, and physical practices that gradually began transforming his body at the cellular level. The process took 3 days, during which Chen Wei never left the tomb. He ate special preserved foods that Princess Mei Lin had created using alchemical knowledge, drank water from an underground spring that had been treated with mineral compounds, and slept on the stone floor while his body adapted to the new energy patterns flowing through it. By the 3rd day, Chen Wei could feel fundamental changes occurring. His vision had become sharper, his reflexes faster, and his recovery time from physical exertion dramatically reduced. Most remarkably, he could sense the guardian's internal energy as clearly as if it were visible light, understanding for the first time how the man had achieved such seemingly impossible feats during their fight. On the morning of the 4th day, Chen Wei experienced something that would have seemed impossible just a week earlier. As he practiced the advanced breathing techniques in Princess Mei Lin's burial chamber, he felt his consciousness expand beyond the boundaries of his physical body. For several minutes, he could perceive the entire tomb complex as if viewing it from above, sensing the flow of energy through the ancient stone passages and even detecting the presence of small animals moving through hidden tunnels far from the main chambers. This is only the beginning, the guardian explained as Chen Wei returned to normal awareness. Princess Mei Lin's techniques will continue developing your abilities for decades to come. What you experience just now will become as natural as breathing with sufficient practice. The transformation process had left Chen Wei feeling simultaneously exhausted and more energetic than he had ever been in his life. His body felt lighter yet stronger, his mind clearer yet capable of processing multiple streams of information simultaneously. When he looked at his reflection in the polished surface of the princess's sarcophagus, he was startled to see that his face appeared several years younger than it had been a week ago. The physical changes stabilize after the 1st month, the guardian noted, observing Chen Wei's surprise at his altered appearance. Your aging will slow to approximately 1 year for every 20 that pass. This gives you roughly 2,000 years to find a suitable successor and ensure the princess's knowledge is properly preserved. 2,000 years. The number was so vast that Chen Wei couldn't fully comprehend it. He tried to imagine all the changes he would witness, all the people he would meet, all the opportunities he would have to help humanity while keeping Princess Mei Lin's secrets safe. The responsibility was overwhelming but also strangely liberating. "What about you?" Chen Wei asked, suddenly realizing that the Guardian's 4-century vigil was finally ending. "What will you do now that your duty is complete?" The Guardian was quiet for a long moment, gazing at the princess's tomb with an expression of profound sadness and relief. "I had not allowed myself to think beyond this moment for over 300 years. The burden of guardianship consumes everything else in a person's life. But now—" He paused, seeming to consider possibilities he had not entertained for centuries. "Perhaps I will travel the world and see how it has changed. Perhaps I will find a quiet place to study and meditate on everything I have learned. Or perhaps I will simply allow myself to age naturally and experience the peace of a normal human lifespan." Chen Wei understood the weight of what the man was describing. 400 years of solitary duty, of constant vigilance, of living solely for the purpose of protecting ancient secrets. The psychological toll must have been enormous, and Chen Wei wondered if he would have the strength to endure such a burden for 20 centuries. Over the following weeks, the Guardian taught Chen Wei everything he needed to know about maintaining the tomb's protections, dealing with potential threats, and gradually introducing Princess Mei Lin's knowledge to the world in ways that would benefit humanity without causing catastrophic disruption. The princess had been far ahead of her time in understanding that scientific advancement needed to be carefully managed to prevent social chaos. Never reveal the full extent of what you know to any single person, the Guardian advised during one of their final lessons. Share medical knowledge with doctors, martial arts techniques with worthy students, philosophical insights with scholars, but always piecemeal and always in ways that seem like natural developments rather than impossible leaps forward. Chen Wei also learned about the network of allies and resources that Princess Mei Lin had established before her death, hidden supporters in universities, monasteries, and government positions who could be trusted with limited knowledge and who would help protect the tomb's secrets. Some of these bloodlines had maintained their loyalty for 4 centuries, passing down their obligations from generation to generation. When the time came for the Guardian to leave, both men felt the emotional weight of the moment. They had known each other for only a few weeks, but the intensity of their shared experience had created a bond deeper than most friendships formed over decades. "I have one final gift for you," the Guardian said, presenting Chen Wei with an ancient book bound in leather that seemed impossibly well preserved. Princess Mei Lin's personal journal, containing her private thoughts about the nature of consciousness, the meaning of existence, and the proper relationship between mortals and the divine. She intended it for whoever inherited her knowledge. Chen Wei accepted the journal with trembling hands, understanding that he was receiving the inner thoughts of one of history's most remarkable minds. The princess's wisdom would guide him through the centuries ahead, helping him navigate the moral complexities that would inevitably arise. As the Guardian prepared to leave the tomb forever, Chen Wei realized that his old life as a simple martial arts master was truly over. He had entered the underground chambers as Chen Wei, the kung fu teacher. He was emerging as something far more significant, the keeper of secrets that could reshape human civilization, the guardian of knowledge that had been waiting 4 centuries for the right person to inherit it. The businessman Liu Ming never learned the true nature of what lay beneath his property. Chen Wei arranged for the tomb's entrance to be permanently sealed, using techniques the princess had developed to make the hidden passage undetectable even with modern technology. Liu Ming was told that the underground chambers contained only empty stone rooms of minimal historical value, and he eventually sold the property to a preservation society that Chen Wei had secretly established. Now, 3 years later, Chen Wei continues his work as a martial arts instructor while secretly beginning to introduce Princess Mei Lin's discoveries to the world. A meditation technique he taught to a stressed businessman led to breakthrough research in stress management. A breathing exercise he showed to a medical student resulted in new treatments for respiratory disorders. A philosophical insight he shared with a university professor influenced a book that changed thousands of lives. Each small contribution feels insignificant compared to the vast knowledge he carries. But Chen Wei has learned patience from the princess's writings. Change that lasts must grow naturally, like a tree developing strong roots before reaching toward the sky. He has centuries to work with, and the wisdom to know that humanity's greatest advancement come not from sudden revelations, but from the gradual accumulation of understanding that builds across generations. The burden is immense, but so is the privilege of carrying forward the legacy of a brilliant woman who understood that true immortality lies not in extending individual life, but in ensuring that wisdom and compassion survive long enough to guide humanity toward its highest potential.